If you guys watch this YouTube channel, you clearly know how big sprint car racing is in the United States, but something you may not know is sprint cars have a big fan base overseas in Australia. The Australian Sprint Car Championship has gone over many different names over the 15 years that it has been a thing. Sprint cars have evolved from crude modified hot rods to dual-winged to 410 cubic inch sprint cars of today. The majority of race cars and engines are imported from the United States. However, just like in the United States, there are some local chassis builders in Australia. Sprint cars themselves have many combinations of chassis and engines, and the equipment is highly specialized. Wheels, suspension, wings, drivetrain, fuel tank, all bolt to a chassis. From 1963 to 1964, the title was known as the Australian Sports Mod Hot Rod Championship. In 1965, it got changed to just the Australian Hot Rod Championship. This was yet again changed in 1966 to the National Super Modified Championship. But, you guessed it, the 1965 name made a return in 1967. And then from 1968 to 1970, the meeting was known as the Australian Super Modified Championship, while from 1971 to 78, the title was called the American Modified Sprint Car Championship, before one more time changing in 1979 to its current name, the Australian Sprint Car Championship. This series has had a lot of names over the time that it has been a thing, but from 1979 to now, it has stayed the same. And then taking a sidestep that plays into it, I'm going to introduce you to the World Series Sprint Cars. Now, the Australian Sprint Car Championship is just one race with qualifying and everything. But the Australian Sprint Car Series is like what we have in the United States, the World of Outlaw Sprint Cars. They build up their points, and they have a championship at the end of the season, and we're going to run over a little bit of history on it. The first ever World Series Sprint Cars meeting was held in Perth at the now Claremont Speedway on December 1st of 1987. Originally, each meeting was held on a single night, though for the past number of years, the meeting is now run over 2 nights, with time trials, heat races, a preliminary B, and then the A on the first night, and more heats, 3 qualifying top 8 shootout races on the second night. Like the Australian Sprint Car Championship, the World Sprint Car Series has been dominated by drivers from the New South Wales. Of the 26 series held, 16 drivers have won from New South Wales. Sydney driver Brooke Taitnell has won a record 8 series since first contesting races in the inaugural run in 1987. Brooke is also part of the only father-son combination to ever win the series with his father, former national speed car and sprint car champion George Taitnell. Winning the first 2 series run in 1987-88 and 1988-89, George Taitnell also finished second in 1989-90, the year that Dumsney won his first series. Visiting American drivers who have been or are regular competitors in the World Series Sprint Cars include Jack Hewitt, Danny Smith, Joey Saldana, Darrell Pittman, and Donnie Schatz, Jason Johnson, and Shane Stewart. Others who have competed in select races while touring Australia include Sprint Cars Racing King Steve Kinser and his younger brother Randy Kinser, along with Tim Green. And now back over to the Australian Sprint Car Championship. Retired Sydney-based driver Gary Rush holds the record with 10 Australian Championship wins, with 18 podium finishes between 1966 and 1998. New South Wales-based drivers have dominated this title with 36 of 52 championships. 6 drivers were from Victoria, 3 each from South and Western Australia. 2 winners have been from Queensland, and 1 winner has been from Tasmania. While many successful Australian sprint car drivers started out of racing speed cars, only 3 drivers have ever won both the Australian Sprint Car Championship and the Australian Speed Car Championship, them being Sydney drivers George Tantinel, Robert Farr, and Adelaide's Phil Marsh. Victorian driver Mac Dumesny, who won the championship in 1991, 98, and 2002, was also the Australian Formula 500 champion in 1981 and 83, and is the only driver to ever achieve the Formula 500 sprint car double. Dumesny is also the son-in-law of former racer Sid Moore, having married Moore's daughter, Melinda, herself a former sprint car driver in 1992. The dates January 25th to 28th, 2012 at Speedway City in Adelaide hosted the 50th anniversary of the Australian Sprint Car Championship. The Sydney driver Brooke Tantinel won his 5th Australian Championship and repeated the feat of his late father George Tantinel, who has only won the Australian Sprint Car title at the track in 1988. George and Brooke Tantinel are only one of the 2 father and son combined to win the championship, the other being Sydney's Steve and Gary Brazier. And the Australian Sprint Car Championship is still happening today. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are about the sprint car racing over in Australia. If you would want to go to one of the races, I personally would love to go to an Australian sprint car race. But like I said, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.